Live, yes.
See, I've already messed it up. So I'm doing the introduction today. I am Kelly with Salty Lake Mercantile. We have Steph here, and we are doing our second edition of DIY Ask the Expert Dish. So we have with us some of my favorite people. We have Miss Sam Klein out of Colorado with, watch me forget already.
Copper Elm.
Name? Copper Elm. Oh my gosh. I knew it was going to, too much pressure. And we Chelsea Terry Evans out of Utah with Apple Blossom Way. And they are here to share best practices and tools. Help me. I already lost it. Come on in, Steph. You can save me now.
All right, guys. So what we want to do today, we've invited these two on as sort of our resident experts to talk about some tools in our trade and other DIY trades that are useful in the crafting, furniture refurbishing, things like that. Some of these tools are very expensive and are pretty reasonable, but these girls are going to talk through which ones are worth the money and which ones you can skimp and save a few bucks on. But before we get started, I want to get a quick introduction. We'll start with Sam, if you don't care. Sam, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you do at the Copper Elm and how you got started in that line of business.
Started out, I'm based out of Colorado. I had 2 stores. I just recently closed one, and I've got a little shop here in Castle Rock. But I started painting furniture 6 years ago, I think, 7 years ago now. Out of necessity, I needed to reset my house, and I was on a budget. So I, started working, and I realized I could actually sell some pieces, and it could actually bring in some income. And I was still working regularly. And then when I had my son, I quit working. So this became my full-time job. So I've been doing it full-time for about 5 years now, and mostly furniture, a little decor, a little random artwork, and a whole lot of jibber-jabbering and writing.
I think we have a little bit of background noise. So if anybody just joined, can you guys mute your mics for us?
We've got a few people connecting. I'll be able to take care of that.
Okay.
So Chelsea, let's get a little bit of background about how you got roped into this.
All right. So my name is Chelsea Evans, and I live in Salem, Utah, which is about an hour south of Salt Lake. And a few years ago, well, I painted furniture long before this, but I went back to work. I had 3 young boys, and we lived in a condo, and life was kind of crazy. So I went back to work as an office manager, and a few years in, I thought, what am I doing? I love working with people, and I do enjoy managing, but it wasn't my passion, and it wasn't what I loved. And so I kind of talked to my husband, and I said, when we bought our house on Apple Blossom Way, I said, I think I can paint, and I think I can make enough money to do my own thing, and I don't have to work for someone else. I don't want to work for the man anymore. I want to work for me. And so he said, okay, that's fine. If you want to run your own business, you need to, can you still hear me? Sorry, the green box went out. Anyway, he said, if you want to run your own business, you need to make X amount of dollars. And so it was intimidating for me at the time because it was about what I was making right then, but I thought I could do it. And so I quit my job, and I went out on my own, and I thought, well, I need a business name. So I sat on my front porch, and I brainstormed for like days. I wrote down name after name after name, all relating to furniture. And then finally, I was sitting there, and the sun was setting, and it was so beautiful. And I thought, I love my home. I love my home on Apple Blossom Way. And it was our first like standalone home. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm going to name it Apple Blossom Way because I love where I am. And so I named my business Apple Blossom Way, and I started, and I never ever looked back. And I'm so glad I didn't, because it's been so much more successful and so much more than I ever hoped that it would be. And I hope that it continues to be that. So mostly I just like to paint, and I really love to teach. And I love when other people learn and they take what they've learned and make it into something magical for them.
Awesome, thank you. So I think both of you are really building a name for yourselves in the industry and kind of reaching two different types of people. So hopefully between all the groups we have and with some of our other co-hosts with we've got a couple people on with Front Room on 7th, Dogwood Exchange, Canterbury Creative, and a couple other businesses. So hopefully all those other groups, we bring in a unique group of people that's completely different, since you guys have such unique offerings between the two of you. So ladies, what's the first tool that's on the agenda?
Category, like organized. Chelsea, we did not plan this well. Do you want me to start with like Sanders? Do you want to go like big to start out?
Yeah. We're going to go big.
Okay, let's just start with the biggest tool. It's, for me, it's, we represent two different sides of this. I have the crappy one, and I am yearning for the splurge here, and I'm saving up my pennies. And Chelsea has what I'm saving for is the Surf Prep. It's the Cadillac of Sanders. I have been rocking this Black & Decker palm sander for probably 5 years now. It's one that's supposed to have the sanding pad that sticks to it like Chelsea's does, except nothing sticks to it. It cost me probably $80, and it was a complete waste of $80. Like half the time I take the sanding pad off and just use it by hand. And then I watch her videos and I'm like, that is why you spend the most money. She does an entire piece of furniture in like 20 minutes and it's flawless. And I'm out there, you know, breaking my arms trying to, and just crying, wishing I had a Surf Prep. So I feel like this is one of like the biggest ones. I'm like, this is on my splurge list. It's been on my Christmas list. And I'm saving my pennies for it. And
So what kind of price range are we talking about against the $80 sander as to the Surf Prep?
So the Surf Prep is around $450.
So pretty big price jump.
It is a difference. But first, I feel like I want to show you the difference between the two, and then I want to tell you why I prefer the Surf Prep over the traditional sander. And the first thing I love, I mean, you can buy the toolbox separate. So the toolbox comes separate from the Surf Prep, but I'll just open it up and show you. And someone just pulled up to my house, so I hope maybe they're not here for me. So this is what comes in the toolbox. It's a bunch of sandpaper and sanding discs. It's just a great way to hold your sander. All right. So this is the sander that I have. This is the 3x4 sander. And you can see it's kind of a rectangle pattern. It's nice because most traditional sanders only have this one layer of something that you would adhere like a Velcro to. This one, the Surf Prep, is awesome because it has 2 layers. And so this comes off and you can reuse it. Okay, there really is someone at my house, and I think it's a client.
oh.
I mean,
Did I answer it? My family's gone.
Let's go answer it.
Sorry.
Bring them on.
You guys want to come with me?
Let's do it.
Should we go answer it?
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, hold.
You can't make this stuff up. So while Chelsea's answering the door, I'm building websites or helping build websites. I'm not building websites. Steph would roll her eyes right now, but I'm helping build websites to upgrade from the Harbor Freight and the Black & Decker. And I think I have at least one other brand that I've tried that just do not work for me. So I'm saving up for the big guy. Like, it's worth it to me. I've probably already spent easily a few $100s just on sanders, just trying to get where I need to be and not wear myself out and not get frustrated and turn and grab a stripper and then go back to sanding again. Don't stop it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like every time I see like the sander itself, with the like regular sanding jobs, it's impressive. But where it becomes drool worthy is when you see them use the big thick sponges on it, and it gets into the crannies of like this furniture that normally you would have to use a paint stripper on and use a bunch of tools and steel wool to really get in those crevices. And instead, they're just like, it's like nothing. I mean, it actually gets in every single crevice of it. And it's just ridiculous. Like, I've become really weird when I want to watch the videos where it's just close-up videos of them sanding it, because it's fascinating to me that like this thing even exists. And I go through sanding paper like crazy. Like, I buy it in the giant sheets, and then I cut it to size and attach it to my sander, and I'll blow through one in like 4 or 5 minutes. And it just gums up. It's disgusting. And then I'm watching these videos with the surf preps, and they're using the same sanding sponge for 6 pieces of furniture. And I've probably spent $450 on just sanding paper in the last couple of years. It's stupid, you know? So it's one of those things where when you add up the money, it's definitely worth the investment. So big on my list.
So one big difference with the surf prep is there's accessories that are available with it, right? It has the ability to hook directly into a shop vac with a setup that you can purchase, and to get near, probably not 100%. I haven't used it personally, so I can't speak to that, but near 100% dust free, right? You're gonna.
Exactly. Yeah, mine that I have, like the little Black & Decker one, has the bag attached to it, and it's
Right.
got a thing that you, and it doesn't work at all. Like, it's supposed to be dust free, and it just makes mess everywhere, and I cannot use it in my house whatsoever. And then everybody that's got a surf prep, they're using them in their living room, and it's totally fine. I mean, that's a huge difference compared to, and it's not like mine was only $5 or something. I still spent a good chunk of money on it, and it was just a waste.
Hey, Angela texted me and said she's not able to get on. The link's not letting her on.
I see one that says Angela's Mini. Let me look here. Guess she shouldn't have that margarita. I sent her a link directly to it. See if we, oh, she said she's on.
Okay. So Chelsea, we were talking about before you so rudely left us all. We were talking about, because I think you sanded inside with the surf prep, and that's kind of what we were focusing on, is the ability to sand inside with very little dust, or little dust to speak of.
Yes. So I apologize for leaving. I'm sorry. That was really, really rude. This is a very, very good client, and I'm actually doing several projects for her house. It's a big home in the Parade of Homes, and I'm really excited. But this was the only time they could bring their mantle to me. And so they just popped in. So I apologize and forgive me. But back to the surf prep. So the 3x4 is what I was showing you. A couple things I'm just going to show you, and then I'll talk about sanding inside and why I like it, because I've had a lot of questions of people that say, well, is it really worth it? Like, is it worth the money? Because that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, right?
Right.
And so here's the reasons why. So their sandpaper, if you're nervous about trying a surf prep, start with just their sandpaper. Their film discs are amazing. So this is what their sandpaper looks like. You notice how it's white? Now, the more you use it, this will turn to green. And so when it's completely green, that's when you know that you've used all of the sandpaper up. So that is a great thing about their sandpaper, is you know when you've used it all or when you can keep going, okay? So if you're not sure, start with their sandpaper. You can still use the link. I think we have a link in here somewhere, and there's 10% off. You can use it on the sanding discs. They have ones for your orbital sander that you can use. That's how I started as well. And I love their sandpaper, so I decided to get the sander.
So the links that you're talking about, Chelsea, I'm going to put those in the chat before we leave the session, and I'll post them in the event, as well as when we post the video. They'll be on the back end of the video, so you guys all have access to these links to these products. Everything that we talk about today will be posted later. And while I've already interrupted you, I'm going to unmute Chris really quickly. He's got just exactly what you're talking about. He has a question about the paper.
Perfect.
So go ahead, Chris.
So how cost effective are their pads, you know, compared to the Diablo pads or the cheap ones you buy, the hook and loop?
Right. They're so much better. And I tested their pads before I tested the sander. Like I said, I used their pads for probably 4 months before I used an actual sander. And I've used pads from Ace Hardware, Home Depot, Lowe's, any brand that I've gotten. And I've had my corals with them, whether they're a little bit too rough for the grit they say, or they're too fine. And I found Surf Preps to be like right on the line, exactly the grit I would expect to do the job that I need. And they last twice as long. So I tested this, I had 2 small buffet and a dresser, and I was able to completely sand down and prep both pieces with 2 pieces of Surf Prep sandpaper. And one was the 80 grit and one was the 220, because I always find sand so it's really nice and smooth. And I was blown away at the difference. Usually I'll go through several sanding pads and really struggle with that, but the Surf Prep lasts a lot longer. So it's definitely, even the sandpaper is worth it. Their sandpaper is awesome. Totally.
Wow. Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so if anybody else has questions about the Surf Prep, go ahead and post those in the chat and we can kind of go through those. While you were away, Chelsea, one of the things, if you could kind of touch on this, is the accessories that are available to fit the Surf Prep. So we talked about like the sweeper attachment, things like that.
Well, the only thing I use the Surf Prep, and then I attach it to a regular like shop vac that I bought somewhere else. So you don't have to purchase their shop vac. You can use your own shop vac and purchase, you just want to purchase the hose that attaches to it. So you have a long enough hose to be able to sand. So you can use that. I haven't used their other attachments with it because I haven't needed it. But can I go through just a couple more things real quick and then we can go on to our next subject? Okay. So I'm just going to give you a couple quick skim over reasons why I like the Surf Prep. Number 1 is because you can choose which, we'll go in order, which size of sandpaper you want to use to get in. So if you want to strip sand, you're going to use your fine sandpaper just like you would on your orbital sander. If you have a little bit of grooves to get into, but you really need to strip it, you're going to use a little bit thicker pad. And then if you've got a lot of grooves, they have all different grits here that you can get into all the grooves and see how it molds to my fingers like that. That shows you that it can sand and go into the grit, into the crevices at the same time. So you can use one piece of sandpaper, but that foam allows it to get into all those crevices, which is super cool. And you can't find that with a traditional sander. So if you're sanding furniture that's detailed, it's really important to use the Surf Prep, and that's why. So that's one reason I love it. The other reason, and this is hands down, besides the no dust sanding, that's huge. If you're doing any type of cabinets, countertops, flooring, not having dust around is a big deal. I've sanded many things without a mask or any protection in my regular clothes, and I don't have a drop of sawdust on me. That's amazing. But the biggest thing for me is I've had carpal tunnel surgery a long time ago. And so sanding is really hard on me. It's hard on my wrists and it's difficult for me. And I use a traditional sander and I'm in a lot of pain. When I use the Surf Prep, its vibrations are very minimal. And so I don't have any pain. It's going to save you a lot of wrist and blood flow issues later on as well. So that's a big thing for me. But those are my main things about the Surf Prep.
So I have a question before you, because I'm selling this to Steph. So keep that in mind. The last one that I got was just a Harbor Freight one because my other one is toast. But the top of the sander is so big. I'm talking off to the side. The top of the sander is so big that gripping it, I can't sand for very long just because it wears my hands out. So with the Surf Prep, how hard is that?
So the Surf Prep is much easier. And this is another thing that's a big deal for me where I've had carpal tunnel surgery and those issues in the past is it fits. And I have like wide hands, but I have very small hands, like my fingers are small. And so to be able to hold this in one hand, and this is the trigger, so it's unique in that the trigger is different and your pressure actually pushes the trigger so that if your sander moves at all, your hand comes off the trigger and your sander stops. Whereas a traditional orbital sander, your trigger's always on. And so if you let go, your sander's going to fly off and it's going to hit the concrete and break. I've had that happen twice. But these won't do that because if you release the pressure, it stops. So they're really easy to hold. They're really lightweight. And it's like a one-handed sanding. So I actually sand with one hand now. And a lot of times, just because I'm an affiliate for Surf Prep, I'll hold my phone and I'll record what I'm doing with the other hand, which is phenomenal. And it's still strip sanding, which is super cool. So yeah, easy to hold.
Awesome. Well, Kelly, you can keep working on the selling, and we'll keep thinking about it. I think a few of the other folks in the group has it. So again, if you guys have questions about the surf prep throughout the rest of the conversation, post them in the chat and we'll get back around to you. So ladies, what's next on the is it worth it?
Mine too. Did you bring an S50?
What? No.
So I brought kind of a random selection of like my favorite brushes, and they go across the board when it comes to pricing. So really quick backstory, I was using, you know, the stubby Wooster brush from Home Depot or Lowe's. It's $7. I still love that brush, by the way, and I couldn't find one. I have like 20 of them and I couldn't find one, so I would have brought that. But I was always using those, and then I kept seeing people swear by a big name natural bristle chalk style brush, and it was a $50 brush, and I'd never spent more than $7 or $8 on a brush before. And I saved up and I bought the big brush, and it never stopped shedding, and it held a ton of paint, and I loved the way it felt, but it destroyed projects for 6 straight months. And I was so mad because it was a huge investment for me. $50 on a brush is not something I take lightly at all. And I still have it, and I used it for 6 months, and then it sat in my drawer for a couple years because after that I found Klingon. And I went and bought from a local retailer here a couple of years ago. I went and bought an F40, and it was a flat, and I think I spent, it was about $30 some on that one. And I was really hesitant because it was another big purchase for a brush. And the second I used it, I never went back. It's such a huge difference. I've never lost a single bristle in any of mine. I had one student in a class that opened up a new S50 and one bristle popped out. And it's the only one. I think I've been using them for 2 years now solid. So I've had one bristle pop out in one brush. They're just insane. No bristles pop out. They are, in like full disclosure, I sell these now. I love them. And like I said, I did not sell them when I first bought one. I became a huge fan before I ever sold them. But they're all like locked in with a concrete resin. You don't lose bristles. You use it damp if you're using chalk style paint. We use them dry for the enamel, but it glides on. You have no brush strokes. It holds 1,000,000 times more paint than a normal paintbrush. So I feel like it's worth its weight in gold. And I'm not one of those people that says you need to have 15 of them. I don't think everybody needs the angled ones and the big block brush that Chelsea's got there. Like, it's great.
Unless you do cabinets.
The cabinet, yeah. I feel like there are certain groupings that, like, once you level up, yes, you need more brushes. But if you're just starting out and you're got a dresser you get one brush, go get an oval. They're really simple because it's the flat ones are good for flat surfaces. A round is good for round surfaces like spindles, things like that. And then the oval is in between. It's kind of a flat, kind of a round. It's good for everything. So if you need one brush, this is the F50. And if you guys can see this, it's ridiculously, I've beaten this up, but the bristles look brand new. But I mean, I use this almost every single day. So I feel like this one is my splurge for my brushes. But when you think, I sell this one for $37 and I've used it almost every single day for a couple years now. So I definitely got my money out of it. And then I have random brushes. Like I'm kind of a brush junkie.
Wait, I have to say something, Sam.
Yeah.
I totally agree with you on that you only have to have one brush. because for the first 6 months, I only had an 040. An 040 Klingon was all I had. And I used it for glazing, top coating, painting, everything. So you don't have to have a huge array and spend hundreds of dollars. You can get by with just one or two and do everything with it. As long as it's water-based and using it for the same thing, I agree with that. So yeah, you're right.
I always have people ask, you know, like, okay, which brushes do I need? And I say, well, what's your budget? Do you want 1 brush, 2 brushes, 3 brushes? Like, are you just jumping in? And if they say, I'd like to get 3 brushes, then I get a better idea of like, okay, you still need in either an S50 or an oval, but then you can get a flat. And then if you want to do a round, and I ask them what projects they're using it on. If they're doing something huge, they need a block brush. If they're doing a china cabinet with crazy crevices, get that angled brush. But it's not, it's an investment, and I'm so cheap that I'm always like, I always hesitate when I tell people like, oh, you need all these different brushes, and I stop and say like, well, what are you really working on? Like, let's start from there. And then it's funny because I'll have people where they're like, okay, I just want that 1 brush, and an 040 is like my go-to for that, or an S50 for people that are just joining Klingon. And then about a month later, you'll see an order pop up and it's 3 more brushes, and I'm like, they love it. Like, this, it's a damn good brush. I'm obsessed. And then, okay.
It's a cult. It's a cult of brushes.
It totally is. But the thing is I felt that way when I joined. I'm not naming the other brand I brought, but the other one was the same mentality. Like, I kept seeing people post that like, this brush is the best brush you'll ever buy. And I was so disappointed in it. And it wasn't until I voiced my disappointment that everyone else was like, oh yeah, mine never stopped shedding either. Yeah, it's not that great either. And I'm like, well, why did everybody tell me to spend $50 on this brush that it just, now it's a paperweight? And I mean, it is, it's heavy, it's huge. But I felt that way about those brushes too. So I was so hesitant to buy a Klingon because I was like, it's just a fad, and it's not. Like, now I'm addicted to it.
No. And Klingons are, if you don't know, Klingons are handmade in Holland. So it's not just a bunch of machinery that's putting together these brushes. They're actually each individually handled and handmade, and they are filled with epoxy to the ferrule here. And so the bristles are tightly packed into that epoxy, so they're not going to shed. If you ever have a problem with the Klingon shedding, then please let whoever you purchase it from know, because they shouldn't. And they do last forever. I use mine for over 2 years every day, and they're amazing. So,
Yeah, I think we've probably in the life of the Salty Lake Mercantile probably sold a few hundred Klingons, and we've had 1 come back with shedding bristles, and I literally think it was just something in the process, that something happened with that 1 brush, because like you guys said, we may have had, when you first opened it, 1 bristle that broke in the shipping and the process of getting it to us, but for the life of it, the shedding is non-existent. Whereas compared to the Home Depot and the Lowe's, even the ones that we love, like the Worcester Shorty is a go-to brush, but unless you're painting something for out on your porch or something, it drags more bristles through it than it leaves in the brush. All right, let me check and see. Did anybody have any questions on brushes? Is there other brushes that folks out there are using that are just super great other than Klingon?
Well, one more thing. Okay, so I was saying I use like these. I have a bunch of artist brushes that I buy just on Amazon, and Chelsea is like a true artist that actually paints canvases, and I'm sure she's gonna like cringe at my collection of artists. Because I buy like cheap little crappy ones, but I mean they work, and I buy them in the packs of like 5 or 10, so that if I destroy them, I don't feel bad. But like these ones I use for varnish. Anytime that like my varnish starts to pool in an area, and it it can get cloudy if you go on too heavy, this just like lightly picks up any of that. I use these to dust off gold leaf, things like that. I use them for dry brushing if I want to add a little color to it, something like that, and they don't cost much at all. And then this is one of my saves. So the Klingon is definitely my splurge. I'm addicted to them, and I'm telling you guys, you only need 1 or 2 or 3. I have probably 25 in my personal collection that I use regularly. So do what I say, not as I do. But I also am addicted to makeup brushes. So I recently started using these. I started like probably 6 months ago. I had some makeup brushes that you can get these at TJ Maxx or on Amazon, or go to Marshall's and their discount bins. And I use these makeup brushes on everything now. So I'm using my Klingon to paint a dresser, but then it's got little nooks and crannies in it. I'll take these to pick up excess paint. I'll do this to add a little metallic to my hardware. And blending is really good with these. And it's honestly the same as if you were using it on makeup. So when you're using brushes that are like this, that are great for blending your eyeshadow, they're also good for blending paint. And they don't cost hardly anything. I mean, you can get a pack of makeup brushes. It's got 10 of them in there for $4 at TJ Maxx. And they really hold up. I feel like these hold up better than artist brushes from, you know, going to Hobby Lobby or something like that. I don't lose bristles in these at all. So this was my save on brushes for sure.
I agree with you there, because I've used, I did recently get some great artist brushes from Prima, but before that I used cheapo Walmart brushes, and they would get ruined. If you left the acrylic in them for any amount of time, they would get ruined. They don't clean like Klingons do. But I do agree, makeup brushes are freaking awesome for that. And then the only other thing I'll add to brushes is if you're using any type of oil base, like a stain or oil-based glaze or anything like that, that's when your chip brushes come in handy, because chip brushes are cheap. They're like $1.29 or something like that. And so those are great to use with oil-based products. And then I just chuck them when I'm done instead of cleaning them. But you don't want to do that with your Klingons or anything. But there is a difference between, like, if you're using chip brushes now, buy one Klingon, just one, and try painting with it, and you will never, ever go back to a chip brush with a water-based product ever again.
One thing I'll throw out there that's not necessarily related to brushes, but I'm sure Kelly's probably talked to you guys about this, but we had one of our neighbors give us a tip several months back about applying varnish with a rag. And so we now, we get these rags from the hospital that have been used and bleached, and they can't use them again, so we get them in bulk. And so it's these white lint-free rags that we literally put on a glove, dip the rag in the varnish and put it on. There's no bubbles. It's a perfect even surface. And with any brushes that we tried, the varnish was bubbly. We just couldn't get a good cover, you know, with it. Lack of skill, something. But the rag has really worked for us.
Yeah, I think Sam does something similar, but it's like with a sponge and a pantyhose.
I remember those pantyhose.
Why don't you tell us about that, Sam?
Let's hear about the pantyhose method.
Watch my video. What was that, like a year ago? I was doing
Well, it was pretty early on. It was I think it was my first introduction to you, and it
Yes.
sealed the deal. Like, it was,
We were all like, did she just say pantyhose?
it's like pantyhose.
Pantyhose?
the bad thing was I didn't notice it until after the video was finished. I had no idea, I don't think, until it was completely finished. But I was doing a whole tutorial where I was varnishing a set of end tables, and I was teaching my technique, which I use automotive sponges from Walmart or Lowe's. I spend $1.50 and I cut them into like 8 or 10 pieces. So I've got a little 1-inch strip of sponge, and those shed because I buy cheap ones. So I dip those into like varnish on a plate, and then I can glide it on. There's no brush marks, and I love the brushes, but I don't use them for varnish. I know Chelsea does. Like, so many people swear by them for varnish, and it's like what you were saying, Steph. Like, everybody, I feel like with varnish, it's very particular. We all have our thing. We have our technique. I've tried with the rag, and it totally did not work for me. I've tried it with the brush. It doesn't work for me, but the sponge works. So I take a piece of pantyhose and I cut them. But when I did the live video, I was only using one instead of a set of pantyhose. So I kept calling it a pantyhose instead of I don't know. This is why it's dangerous to have me on videos like this.
It's beautiful. It's the best thing I've ever heard.
I think you called me pantyhose for like 6 months.
I did.
I remember
And I
that.
loved you for it.
So guys, a couple of the folks in the chat have asked a little bit to have a little bit more detail about the big block. And the one Chelsea has, guys, this is a big block brush that comes with a big handle, but you're obviously using it without the handle, right?
Yeah. So now they look nice or new, but I use mine like crazy. So this is the block brush, and mine's a little bit wet right now, so it's not spreading as nicely. But the the big block brush, or big boy brush, I like to call it, does have a handle. I typically like to take the handle off, and I hold it just in the palm of my hand like this because it's easier for me. Like I said, I have carpal tunnel issues, and so anything that I can hold is easier than the handle, a long handle. So they're all tightly packed like this, and they hold a lot of varnish. I do sometimes use a block brush for varnish. If I need a real nice smooth finish, I spray my varnish. But the block brush is awesome for cabinets and stuff like that too, because it's so big and it will hold a lot of paint and it will cover a large surface. So if you're doing like the sides of cabinets or vertical surfaces, the block brush is ideal for that. So it's worth, they're like $52 to $56 depending, the B10s like this and the B12s this size. So depending on which one you get. But if you are doing a lot of cabinets, or I painted my walls with these. I use my regular latex paint as long as it's water-based, and I will paint them with this, and it's super fast because it holds so much paint. So they're worth the investment for sure, especially if you do a lot of that type of work. I wish all of them, the handles came off of all the brushes, actually. Sorry.
All right, I don't see any other questions right now about the brushes. So what else in the industry do we have that's in your tool arsenal that's a big spend or a big save?
So I have one more that's a huge save that is one of the silliest little things, and I use it just about every single day. These little sets of picks. My ex-husband's a mechanic, so I still have his toolbox in the garage, and he had this entire array of picks, and he had the fancy Snap-on ones, and they're not cheap. Snap-on is crazy expensive for tools. It's the surf prep of tools, and I realized that Harbor Freight sells them and Amazon sells them. This one's a Harbor Freight one, I think, or it was an Amazon one, but you can get a whole set of these for about $3. And I've never had a handle fall off. I've never had them bend. And this one's actually bent on purpose. Like, you buy them in a set and they come in all these different shapes. There's hooks and stuff. I use these every single day on every single piece of furniture I do. Any dresser that has, you know, any kind of a crevice, I get in there with sandpaper on this, or I use my rag on this. I scrape gunk out of everything with them. And they're just awesome, and they cost nothing. It's way smaller on the end than a screwdriver, or, you know, trying to get anything else into any nooks and crannies. These are amazing, and I literally have probably 40 of them, like every shape and size, but they don't cost anything. So
that's
that was
cool. I've never seen those.
You can also get dental picks. They're amazing. So if you happen to have a dentist in your family, or somebody in your pocket there, you can get cheap dental ones as well, but these ones I feel a little better because they've got a plastic handle. But I use these for, if you guys do vinyl work or anything like that. I have a Cricut, so I don't use any of my Cricut tools anymore, and these I feel like are perfect for weeding out the vinyl and things like that. So super cheap and crucial. So
That's a good tip. I think we're always cramming screwdrivers into crevices, and sometimes you damage the wood.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys. So what other big tools do we have? I saw some folks earlier asking about a few things on the copper elm, and I'm drawing a blank what they were asking about.
A lot of people are saying brushes were big on theirs. The surf prep, pretty much everybody was just talking about the surf prep. I put a surf prep in the picture, so instantly everybody's like, I want one so bad.
I think it's on everybody's wish list right now that does any kind of furniture work, because they've seen the video of the sponge going in there and it looks all magical.
Right. Everybody either wants a surf prep or they bought a surf prep. There's nobody else. Like, it's
the only other thing I'll say about surf prep is just keep in mind, as with any other tool that you use, there is a little bit of a learning curve. So when I first got my surf prep, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to town with this thing, just like my regular sander. And I had to learn that it's totally different. That the movements of the sander are different than my traditional sander, that I have to let the sander do the work and not push it the way that I did my DeWalt sander. And so there is a little bit of a learning curve. So just keep in mind with any new tool that you use, if you're paying a lot for it, give it the time and grace to kind of learn, you know, the way that it works. I've had that experience with paint sprayers too. So just kind of make sure that you give it that time and learn really how the sander works, and then you will have a much better experience than expecting it to work just magically and better than the sander that you currently have.
So to kind of segue into sprayers, because we see this question almost every day, is what sprayer are you using? And you've got two options there, right? You've got electric or you've got pneumatic.
Mm-hmm.
Now we use pneumatic, but we use probably the absolute cheapest sprayer on the market, the Harbor Freight, the little $20 purple gun. And the thing is indestructible as long as you wash it as you need to, especially if you're using 1 hour enamel. What we do is when we fill up the cup, we fill it about 3/4 of the way full, and we spray it all the way out, and then we clean after every cup, regardless of where we're at. If you don't do that, especially the 1 hour enamel is going to dry up in there. But we've heard and seen reviews for all sorts of different sprayers out there, between the electric home use ones and different more commercial sprayers out there. Does anybody have one that they use that's more high end that they're in love with?
So I've used a ton of different sprayers, and I will tell you, if you are new at spraying, if you haven't had a lot of experience with spraying, or if you're only spraying occasionally and you have at least a 21-gallon air compressor, you need a sufficient air compressor or you're going to burn through your engine. So if you have a good size air compressor, then the $20, $16 sometimes from Harbor Freight, the purple gun is awesome. It's great to use it. So go for it, use it, especially if you're only using it occasionally. Now, as you start to spray more and more, if you're doing cabinets for people and customers and things like that, then I recently purchased a Fuji spray, the Q5 sprayer. It is awesome. It has a small box that you can carry around, so it's easy to move from job site to job site. It is about $1,400 compared to, your $16 plus an air compressor is around $400, $500, depending on the type you get. So it is more expensive, but if that's the type of business you're doing, then it's worth the investment. But if you're just doing it here and there, the purple gun's great. And then guess what? If you don't clean it out good enough, if it doesn't work as well, chuck it and go get another one, because it's only $16. Right. And that one is just as good as the $40 or $60 silver gun that Harbor Freight has. So
yeah, the only big problem with it is there's not sized nozzles. So you do, if you want to increase it, use a little drill tip to drill it out a little bit bigger. For the most part, though, we've used it with Wise Owl chalk and 1 hour enamel without having to water anything down with the 1 hour enamel, which we wouldn't anyways. But the chalk paint, I think we may have done a 10%. Very little, and some of the cans, if you guys all know, are a little thicker than others, so it really depends on what you open up and how it looks when you open it up. But I think really for somebody starting out, get some cheap paint, get that Harbor Freight gun and spray your yard, spray a tree. Just kidding, don't do that, but it's good to get the feel of how it sprays and the adjustments with something that's cheaper, that you're not, if you're doing it every day, like Chelsea said with the cabinets, you do need something more industrial. You do need something that can adjust for what you're spraying, and that you have the different nozzles depending on whether you're doing prep and primer or you're spraying your base, or the new 1 hour top coat sprays a little differently as well. So there is certainly a room for improvement there, but for, like I said, $16 or $20, it's a no-brainer.
Yep. And every product you use is going to spray differently. So there's certain paints I'll spray right through it, no problem. Some will have to thin. So it really depends. You kind of have to play with it, and then just kind of go from there. And then the other thing is the same way with the surf prep. So I bought that $1,400 sprayer, and I was a little bugged when it wasn't just doing magic for me. I was like, I spent a lot on this, and I still had to. It was a learning curve, and I had to get to learn how to use it, and then I was happy with it. So keep that in mind too, that anything you buy is going to have that learning curve too.
Right. It's like when we brought the laser in the shop, you spend a lot of money on these things. It doesn't work itself. You have to adjust the mirrors. I had to go in and align the laser itself and learn how to adjust the lens and all that to actually get it to cut and determine, you know, where that actual focal point was on that lens. And we see a lot of people, even in our industry, that are bringing in new products to subsidize their business. And they're expecting to bring in a machine like that, turn it on, send something to it, and it makes something pretty. It took us months, you know, to be able to be able to even get the burn right on it to where it wasn't charring everything. And when we first started, you look at it and you think, well, that's pretty cool. That looks great. And then 6 months later, you're like, wow, I was really putting out some shit.
Amen. Isn't that how it is in everything we do, though?
Yeah.
We're
You're like,
"This is
wow,
so
somebody
good."
took that?
Yeah, we look back, we're like,
Yeah.
I have a dresser that was blended, and I was so proud of it when I did it. I was like, my blending is incredible. And now I don't even think I have a photo of it on my Facebook page. I'm like, somebody bought it. I'm like, oh no, let me redo it for you. Back then, but it's the same way, like with the stupid Cricut. Like I bought that because I was like, oh, I can make some pillows and some coffee mugs for my store. And it was probably a 3-month learning curve and like really studying. And the way my brain works, like I get really angry that I don't master something right away. So I was just all in on this stupid vinyl machine. And I finally got it, and now I can do it in my sleep. And I have people constantly that are like, oh, I bought a Cricut because I saw you made those pillows. And they're like, oh, I'm going to do it. And then a week later, they're like, how do
Want to buy my Cricut?
you use this? Like, it doesn't on it for you, everything for you. I'm like, here's a Facebook page I found, and that's how I learned. Like, it's so frustrating, but it's like that with everything we do. There's this giant learning curve. And then once you get past it, you can do it in your sleep.
Yeah, and that comes back to the conversation we had last week about pricing points. Is a lot of folks don't understand the time you've spent to hone that skill, as well as the time you've spent researching methods and ways to implement it. And you know, their idea is, well, I can go home and paint a dresser, paint one of mine, and go to Lowe's and buy a $5 quart of paint and do the same thing. Maybe, but probably not. So it's at least a pain point that we're all going to see and be frustrated with, especially if we're out there. And you guys are probably key people in that. You're out there finding new methods and putting new techniques out there for people to learn. And you're probably getting harassed to death with, oh, I can do that. Can you just tell me real quick how to do it? So we see that a lot. So guys, we're down to about the last 10 minutes of the call. I want to open it up to any other products that the folks who have joined us, if they have questions about other products that we can answer, or maybe someone in the group can answer, or if you just have a general question for Sam or Chelsea, ask them anything.
So I'm gonna approach the elephant in the room. So paint, because we've talked about all the tools, but is spending a ton of money on paint worth it? Like, does it make a difference? Can you go to Lowe's and buy that $5 paint or that mist tint and do okay? Or do you spend the extra money? I know the answer, but do you spend the extra money on that paint, and why?
So I want to talk on this really quick. And sorry, my internet just completely cut out until like 3 seconds ago. So I don't know if I totally missed, like, there was like 3 minutes where Steph
We just said some funny things about you, but we'll watch it later.
I'll watch it.
Oh, Angela.
When I started painting furniture, I was buying the Oops containers of wall paint at Lowe's. So I was spending $2. I was doing this as just a hobby, and then I started doing it and selling it. But I was like, I can do this. I switched over from that to general finishes. I did general finishes milk paint exclusively for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and then I switched to Wisel. I don't think, and this is where it gets controversial, I don't think that everybody has to buy the top quality paint. It's not required. I think it makes your life a lot easier overall. So if all you can afford is the Oops container at Lowe's, you get that. You buy that, and that's what you do, but you have to do a lot more prep work. I have this dresser that I'm sitting next to right now, was the first piece I ever painted for myself. I painted it about 6 years ago, and it's Bear or whatever Oops paint from Lowe's. It's still awesome. There's not a single chip in it. I spent hours prepping this thing. I mean, I stripped it, I sanded it, I cleaned it like crazy, I primed it. I did everything you could possibly do with a piece of furniture. And I painted it. It's got a million clear coats on top of it. There's quality all over.
Do you see, sorry, do you see the cat?
Sorry. We kiss sometimes.
But yeah, I think it's totally possible to paint a piece of furniture with wall paint. I think you need to take a lot of extra precautions and go above and beyond with your prep work and your top coat. If you can only splurge on one thing, buy the extra fancy top coat, get the YSL varnish. When I switched to General Finishes, I still love their milk paint. I love the way it goes on. It worked really well for me. I swore by their top coat. It was the only thing I would ever use, no matter what paint I did. And then I won a can of YSL in a giveaway, and I was like, I don't chalk paint, but I'll try it, you know? And I tried it, and I fell in love instantly. Like, it just, I realized what I'd been missing this whole time, and just blending it and using it in general was great. But I still used the other top coat because I swore by it. It was all I knew, and it was so durable. And then I opened up a store, and that store has shopping carts. And people drive those shopping carts right into your furniture, your fancy furniture that you spent 20 hours painting, and they'll drive a shopping cart right into it. And every single piece that was done in YSL varnish was fine. And every other piece that was done in any other top coat got damaged. And that was the first year I was there. I was still using General Finishes. I was still using polyacrylic on some things. And I know people swear by all the other brands. For me personally, I watched my pieces get damaged. I watched them and had to bring them home and redo them over and over and over again. And the money is in the top coat for sure. The ease is in the paint. When you spend the better money on a better quality paint, it's just so much easier. Like, it makes your job a piece of cake. And you look like a pro. It self-levels. You don't have all the brush marks. Like, my dresser is really cool. It's covered in black glaze. It's turquoise teal, covered in black glaze. It's a total, like, Sam dresser. But it's covered in brush marks. Like, it looks cool because it's kind of supposed to. But if you want, like, an actual professional-looking piece of furniture, get a paint that is self-leveling. And then get a brush that helps with that. Use this damp with the chalk style paint. It self-levels. Even if it's the first piece you've ever done, you'll look like a pro. So I feel like that's where you can get away with using cheap products, but you're going to have to do a lot more work.
Agree. A lot more coats is usually what we've seen, especially in wall paint. Years ago, it was to repaint a room was all we could afford, to buy a gallon at Walmart or whatever the cheapest paint was. And you end up, for a room, you end up going through 2 gallons of paint. So you really haven't saved any money because and it was probably back in the time when darker colors. I think Kelly wanted to paint all our house brown for a long time. It was really awesome.
Gray now.
It's really awesome with animals in the house and where everything, all the hair and stuff. Yeah, we had orange and green and yellow. It was beautiful. It was beautiful paint. And but we bought all this cheap paint, and we would have to paint 2 and 3, 4 coats to get coverage. Whereas if we would have bought, for wall paint, Sherwood-Williams or something that's, double or triple the price. But at the end, we would have probably spent about the same amount and saved ourselves 2 days of work. So that's really what you got to think about, is what kind of coverage you're getting, what it looks like after it dries, and like you said, Sam, the durability, if something does bump it.
I'll add one thing into that, is that because I started out with latex paint, making my own Chucks type paint, which is it's actually not a thing. Like, it's not really the same. It's totally different chemically. It's completely different. But the other thing I'll just add is it sounds 100% right. It's all in your prep work. It's in what you use, and it's in your top coat. But chalk style paints are made for, like, blending and layering and texturing, which is super cool. So if you want to do anything artistic, you're going to need a different type of paint. But then the other thing is, like, this chair that I painted, you can use the chalk synthesis paint to paint chairs. And there's a difference between the enamel and the chalk synthesis line in painting fabric. But this is actually velvet, and it actually feels like suede leather now. So it does matter, and you can do other cool projects with it besides just painting furniture too. So keep that in mind, on your medium matters on what you're applying it to.
I think on the same note, there's also a way to save while using top quality products is that you can use different products for different techniques. You can use glaze as a stain. You can use paint as a wash. You can add a little water to it or add a little varnish to it and turn it into, and that's a glaze that she used as a stain on wood.
It's enamel.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Seriously.
I sand it down to raw and brushed it with carbon enamel and wiped it back. So it's sealed, done, and stained.
Wow.
Yep, you can do
A lot
it.
of times I'll notice I'll have a client that, you know, they place an order one month and then the next month they say, okay, I have this project and I want to do this look on it and I need to buy these 3 things. And I'll say, well, last month you bought Java glaze. You can totally use that and then save your money on that. Like, I would rather people reuse what they already have and save a little bit. And then you can afford to buy the higher quality products because you're using them on a lot more things. So, I mean, you can use salve on literally everything. I don't even buy frizzies anymore. I just put salve on everything. But you can use glaze as a stain. You can use paint as a stain. You can use it as a wash. You can soak it into wood. You can use it on fabric. I mean, you can use all these different things 5 or 6 different ways, and it stretches your money so much farther.
Okay, I have one last thing to add because I know we're running out of time, but I feel like this is a really important thing. Out of everything we've talked about tonight, because we've talked about like what's worth the money, right? So ultimately, if what's worth the money, think about not only what you're paying for things, quality products, but also who you're buying them from. If you are buying them from the cheapest place possible, if you're shopping for the cheapest price possible, you're missing the big picture, because the person who you're buying them from is very likely to be helping you and guiding you and giving you advice. And just like Sam said, like, oh, last month you bought this glaze, well, you can use it again. But if you're buying it from a discount super center or someone who's offering a bunch of discounts, you're missing out that personal care. And I keep pointing down to Sam because, like, in my corner, she's in this corner. But you're missing out on that personal care, like that one-on-one, hey, you already bought this, you can use it again. And so think about that. Like, what's worth the money? Is it worth it to just get it the cheapest, or is it who you're buying from? You can get advice, lessons, ask color questions, anything from them because you're buying them from them. So think about that too. That, I feel like that's it's a thing. It's important.
Okay, guys, we'll take a couple extra minutes if I have to edit out some to get the video down, but we'll open up for the floor to have questions if you want to unmute yourself and ask. If anybody has anything.
I think I saw Wendy and, oh my gosh, Chris had mentioned a paint sprayer in the comments. I saw it flash up, and I want to say Home Right, maybe, that they had success with.
They mentioned Home Right.
So I don't know if they want to mention, I don't know if they're still on or they want to talk about it, but they had mentioned Home Right, I think. We'll make Wendy and Chris join us.
I think they're dancing.
Are you guys on? Wendy is. They've done made their background and made themselves invisible.
Look at them.
Work here. Would you be a potato next time too, like the one lady?
Can you see this?
We see it. So is this one electric or is it pneumatic?
So this one is electric.
It's electric.
It's the Home Right Finish Max Super. And it comes with, you can order some extra nozzles on Amazon, but it comes with a good set so that we can use whatever finish or product we want. Here it is. Oh, it's a little pack of tips. Yeah. Chris, your background is messing me up.
Change the background.
Hold on.
It's
I like
trippy.
the background. Look.
Virtual background.
Virtual background none. Yay.
There we
Okay.
go. Now you get to see.
Now you get to see us in the actual shop here. Okay.
I'm jealous of the shop.
Yeah.
The spray tips that comes with it. And I
Okay.
started out with the cheaper model, which is like $50, I think, which is great. But when we started using 1 hour enamel and the varnish, this was better because I can use different tips for without having to thin anything. So
my question on the electric, Wendy and Chris, is how long can you use it before it overheats, or does it get hot?
I have not had a problem with it getting hot. It's like you said in the beginning, you've got to kind of learn how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you've got the right nozzle and the right settings, set, I haven't had any issues with it overheating, and I probably use it maybe 30 minutes at a time.
Okay, so but probably average use, but no heat problems, and a lot of the electric ones, from what I can remember, after 10 or 15 minutes of straight spraying, they're so hot you can't touch them.
No, I hadn't had any problem with this one. It was recommended as one of the good starter ones, and I haven't really moved forward from it. Mine needs to be cleaned out. I'm bad about leaving it sometimes, so I have to clean it out. But
if you've left it and it's cleanable, then that's pretty good. Then you have good access to the inside parts.
Oh yeah, yep, it comes completely apart.
All right, I see Sherry's unmuted herself. Let's hear about that meme, Sherry.
No memes today. Which one? No, I was going to make a comment. At the last Wise Hour retreat, the Klingon family, we got to meet the Klingon family, Frank and his wife, his daughter, and her fiance. And they mentioned that because the brushes, are, someone said that they're made in Holland. They're actually made in they're such an intense brush. They're made in 3 different places. They start in America. And then I think, if I have the story right, they go to Mexico City, and that has something to do with the fact that they clean themselves, that nobody mentioned. They clean themselves for the, bumbleheads that want to rinse it out and throw it in the, throw it in the water. But anyway, and then they go to Holland, and then they're bound together there. So, anyone who, Made in America is very important to us. And a third of their process is, I think it's in Washington State or Oregon. The other thing was the perk of Wise Owl paint. One of our favorite things is how friendly they are to the earth. And we all agree you get what you pay for. But I went to a watercolor class in one of the art centers in Sharonville, Ohio, and at the end of the night, I'm just used to Wise Owl, it's just, it's not harmful. It's not. And I thought that, it just about got ugly because they have such a strict, don't put the paint down the drain, and you had to wipe everything down with the paper towel, and everything had to prove that so the friendly to nature, it is our owner and CEO is a scientist and was out hunting mushrooms today. And, so she makes—
What kind of mushrooms?
I did not.
I hope morels.
But she is, if it's not friendly to the earth and it's not going to injure a sloth baby at some point in time, she's not going to put it out on the open market. But the Made in America, the Klingon brushes, hands down best brush on the face of the earth. And we're not partial, we're just honest, but they are 1/3 of their process is made in America. And I think that's something to us.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I got. No memes.
All right, so the most important question of the entire evening, and I'm open to feedback from anybody, but let's talk about Carol Baskin.
She doesn't want to talk about Carol.
My hair.
She will not even watch Tiger King.
She did my hair.
We're 2 episodes.
Carol did my hair.
I've had to read my schoolwork and be a good kid.
I think we've been doing websites, lots of websites. But we're 2 episodes in, and I think Carol Baskin might be the most hated woman on the face of the planet.
You will hate.
You know what? She gets blamed for everything in my house. Everything.
Do what?
She gets blamed for everything in my house. If something happens, I'm like, who did this? Skylar's always like, it was Carol. It's Carol Baskin.
And it probably was.
She's sneaky.
Yeah.
I have watched half of one episode, and I'm like the lady, I ain't doing it.
I did it.
Mm-mm.
No, you'll finish it. You'll finish it.
No, I'm not. I refuse. Half an episode, that's all I got.
All right. So if you've watched Tiger King, then you need to watch The Wild and Wonderful Whites of West Virginia, because Boone County, West Virginia is where I'm from. And if you like Tiger King, you're going to love Jessica White.
Oh boy.
You know what? The one show that we do watch that proves what old ladies we are. If you guys do Netflix, there's a BBC show, The Repair Shop. You guys need to be watching The Repair Shop.
Sam, I've told you about The Repair Shop.
It is where it's at, and they do some amazing restorations on all types of stuff, and even the teddy bears. When they do restorations on those, you're like, who the hell packs around a teddy bear their whole life? Then you're crying at the end, and you're so happy when the teddy bear's reunited, and it's awful.
They're crying and you're crying, and it's great.
Yeah.
Sorry, can we take a moment to figure out what Sherry just wrote on that note?
I didn't see it.
Put it back up, Sherry.
I just wanted Stephanie to know I was paying attention. I'm taking notes. I said the repair.
The
I
prayer. Oh my
said
God,
the repair
Sherry.
shop,
It's
and I
good.
said
It's so good.
It is
It's so good.
awesome. It's
Oh,
like
you watch it,
MacGyver
Angela?
Monday on steroids. It's awesome.
Oh boy. Chris and Wendy, are you guys leaving us, I guess?
Everybody's
All right, guys.
like,
Well,
I'm
we're a
out.
little bit over. Thank
Yeah, we
you
got
two
another
so
couple
much
minutes.
for jumping on. Guys, everybody, thanks. I'll be posting the video later with Chelsea and Sam's links to all their goodies. Everybody have a good night, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye. Good
Bye.
job, girl.
Bye, guys. It was beautiful, Chelsea.